Vedanta, so Vedanta really is a personal experience. You see what it means? And our personal experience is that we all want joy. We all want happiness. When we are born, no one needs to be taught that you need to be happy. In fact, Swami Dayananji used to say that people don't even tell you how to be happy. So, people teach all kinds of things, but how to be happy is not taught. But regardless of that, our personal experience is that we all want happiness. Even a baby wants happiness. So the only issue is, what kind of happiness? And if you analyze our life's experiences, our happiness or joy is, number one, fleeting. But more importantly, it is conditional. And so anytime we are happy, it's very rare that you don't have a condition with it. You'll say, I'm happy because. Now, if you look at what the teaching of Vedanta is, which is really the goal of life, is to have unconditional happiness. This is what we need to really learn, which is possible. That is, in fact, our own nature. So there is an element of discovery, an element of, we will discuss all of that later on, of thinking, viveka, all of that. But the fact of the matter is that, number one, it is possible. We begin our life not even thinking it's possible. We all think that we have to do something in order to be happy, which is natural, which is how we are made by Ishvara. But there is something more to it, which is our happiness doesn't need to be made. It needs to be discovered as our own innate nature. So the goal of life is to discover an unconditional happiness which cannot leave us, because that is our own nature. So that's how I would answer that question. And in fact, what I would do in all of these is to open up to the person who asked the question to see if that is okay, if some more discussion need to take place. So Molly, if you could unmute yourself and tell me, how is that okay with you?
Thank you, Vijayji. And it's very nice to see you in person for the first time on Zoom. That explanation was actually very helpful, because I was thinking that was maybe an element of it, but I didn't understand that was sort of the basis of the ultimate goal. And that actually sounds very logical and makes sense to me. Thank you for that explanation.
Okay, good. So the next question I will take up is from Darshana. So Darshana had written to me a little while ago, and I'm not going to read her questions verbatim, but let me summarize it. What she said was that she's always had a question that in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is asked to adopt violent means in order to defeat the Kauravas. She tries to, Darshana tries to compare that to the religious violence which we see all over, most of the time, especially these days, for example, in Afghanistan and other places and so on. And she says, I don't understand what the difference is. Are we not also talking about the same thing? This is her question. So, Darshana, there is a big difference. The difference is that the human beings were created with human values. And the human values don't need to be taught. Just like the question on the happiness doesn't need to be taught. It is very natural to our being that the human values are true to us. And those, what are the human values? First of all, non-violence. Secondly, no cheating. We do not, nobody wants to be lied to. Nobody wants to be hurt. Nobody wants to be lied to. Nobody wants to be violated in terms of the normal conduct of life. On those kinds of things, we can go on, but you can see that these are natural values which no one needs to really teach us. Even a child, if you knock the child down, you think that's going to be happy? No. And so there are natural values. Now, what happens if those natural values are violated? And so it is considered that from the standpoint of society, and the standpoint of groupings and so on, such natural values should not be violated. And if there are some tendencies to violate that, then you have to defeat those tendencies, because you will then let unnatural values take over, which is completely an antithesis to our nature, our beingness as a human being. So in the case of the Mahabharata, these values were violated continuously. And so anytime the good people with the Pandavas, with all of the people following them, were trying to do something, they had some weaknesses. So even the Pandavas has some weaknesses. For example, one of the weaknesses was gambling. And you know that they lost, but even in gambling, it was cheating that really defeated them. Not only that, after that, they agreed to all of the repercussions of the gambling losses, and they were not allowed to even fulfill those. The Pandavas wanted 5 villages, and the Kauravas said, no, we cannot let you. You just have to stay in one place. Can we have 5 bedrooms, one for each of the people that are married? No, you cannot have that. So it's just one thing after the other. And so Arjuna was told that, listen, the societal values are being violated. You need to defend it. So please go ahead and do what you need to do. So this is the case there. In a religious setting, this is entirely different. So you have some kind of an imagined value that the God has, that if you don't believe in me, you're allowed to be killed. Totally different. We don't know what the value, what the concept of the God is. This is not a human value. Human value is just to be left alone and to be happy. This is completely contrary to it. So I remember this so well. It's interesting. I happened to be at the ashram 3 days after the huge New York, that World Trade Center being, 3,400 people being killed. We were all just walking around in a daze. You could actually see from not far away, all of the destruction that had taken place. And people were all very upset. How could this happen? And how did Swamiji, I remember, made this point. He said, even of the people who were perpetrators of this, their human values are the same as yours and mine. What is different is the religious misinterpretation and all of the wrong teaching that is given to such people. And so really there is a big difference between human values and also religious impositions that take many forms. So I would say that there is a very basic difference between what Krishna had asked Arjuna to do and what we see happening in this world in the name of religious values. Darshana, you can unmute and tell me if it's okay.
Thank you so much for clearing this for me. I have been approached by different people and we discussed this thing and I said, I have to ask you. And I understand now. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Molly has two other questions, but before I get to that, I would like to invite Amit to, he had written a question for me, quite an elaborate set of questions. But Amit, if you could just verbalize what your question is, and then we can go to that, and then I'll go back to the second question from Molly later. Amit?
Thank you, Vijayji. Like you said, it's a little bit detailed. So let me set up the context first and then ask my question, if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
So I've been thinking about how to apply Vedantic teachings in our everyday lives, including, for example, to the decisions we make. And I'm not talking about simple decisions like whether I should eat a banana, an orange, or an apple, but things that can seriously alter the course of our lives. So Ishvara has given us a role to play, and sometimes we may find ourselves in situations where things are not going right. For example, one situation from our professional lives could be some of us, let's say somebody is in a job where either the job satisfaction is not there, company culture is not good, you're not making the progress you want, or the boss is simply a devil. So whatever the situation might be, you will be thinking, I should change at least my role or my company. From personal life, it may be a situation where somebody is in a marriage or a relationship or friendship where despite your best efforts, things are not going right. And you're wondering, what have I gotten into? Things should change, maybe drastically. Third example could be you have a child who is just going rudderless. So you're wondering, what should I do? What should I change? Now, interesting thing is, in all these situations, we can possibly take two approaches. One approach could be, this is Prarabdha, Ishwar's will. Let me just see play it out and things will be fine. So that's one approach we can take. Second approach we can take is, you may think it's Prarabdha, all right, but still God has given, Ishvara has given me the agency of free will. He has graced me with discrimination when I can look at things and make the right decisions, whatever it might be. So with that in mind, I had three questions. One was, when faced with such situations, when do you know you should make a decision to begin with, or just not do anything? Second is, how do you make such decisions? Based on what? And the third related question is, having made such a decision, which can drastically alter the course of your life, how do you know you have made the right one? Because all those decisions at the end of the day are driven by, at the minimum, a desire for change, a desire to improve things, or desire to gain something. So that may all start a new cycle of kama karma. So those are my 3 questions, and I would really appreciate your guidance on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Amit. That's very, very detailed and comprehensive set of things that, of course, require a lot of time to sort out and so on. So at best, as I did in my reply to you also, be somewhat brief for now, but that doesn't mean that we don't have some further things to discuss and so on. So just let me kind of give you some elements of the concepts that would appear to me as an answer to your question. The first thing is this word called, and I'm talking it from a Vedantic standpoint, and in fact, I will bring that up as a basic distinction between Vedanta and non-Vedanta in a minute. That'll come later. But regardless of that, the definition of a world very well presented needs to be understood, which is Maya is Anirachinea. This is an interesting word which really requires a lot of unfoldment and discussion. And I'm very indebted to Swami Maheshananji for doing that, because I also didn't quite understand what this, I understood the meaning of Anirachinea, but not in the full context of how he explained it. So let me explain what that means. Anirachinea means the nature of the world is, it is not categorically, it cannot be categorically defined. It is always going to have an element of vagueness, of indescribable non-solutions. Okay, so if we look upon our life as something that I need to figure out, this is a mistake. So the figuring out can be done on a limited basis to, in Hindi they say kaam chalao. So kaam chalao means somehow make it work for your condition without really looking into the details of exactly what this is and so on. So regardless of what we do in our life, it should be clear to us that we actually spend all of our life and we die without solving problems. It's just no one has said, so, you know what, I have accomplished everything that I wanted to do that, except for the possibility of a Vedanta. So we'll come to that distinction later. But as long as we are looking at the world, and the world means Maya Shakti, it is Anirachinea. So this is number one. So there cannot be an absolute defined course of action. You'll say, this is the best thing that we can do. It is a flow of things. Anyway, I won't spend any more time on that. Because this is number one. Now let me go back to two other concepts. One is Prarabdha and non-Prarabdha. And the other one is a Jnani versus a non-Jnani. And by Jnani, I mean someone that has reasonably understood the lessons of Vedanta. It is not just somebody who's just done Tattva Bodha, but as Swami Paramarthananda says so well, and Swami Dayananda used to say the same thing, that when you want to make a Rasagulla, so you make you fry the dough, and The next thing is you have some sugar that you have to dip it into. You cannot just dip it in just a little bit and take it out. You have to leave the ball in the chasni, which is the sugar liquid, for a while for it to absorb. Swami Paramarthananda makes the same point. It is not just casual listening, but really a lifelong commitment to understanding what is it that Vedanta is saying. That person is called a jnani. Now, there's a distinction between a Jivan Mukta and a jnani. I would say that most of you that have been listening to Vedanta for several years are jnanis. That's my view, okay? You and I may not be Jivan Muktas, but we are jnanis. As opposed to people that have had no concept of what the self is, what is electricity and what is appliance and reflection, all of those kinds of things are not there. So there is a distinction between those two people, okay? Jnani versus non-jnani. Now comes the issue of Prarabdha versus non-Prarabdha. This Prarabdha also is another thing that we have to really understand. This is a very important thing. Again, we have a tendency to just take a word and say Prarabdha means that whenever what cannot be changed. Okay, then let's move on to the next one. The implications of Prarabdha are enormous. Let me just spend a couple of minutes on it. Prarabdha means a careful choice of the building of a life based on a lot of work that you are doing now. Just as you look at, for example, this life versus the next coming up life, we are spending a lot of time building the house for the next life. We are thinking, our tastes are changing, our values are changing, and Ishvara is very aware of that because Ishvara is the Antaryami. And so when you leave this life, you now have a blueprint of what is it that you need to do next, what kind of a life you will have based on all of the parameters that you did on your previous life. If you wanted to, for example, be born as a sannyasi, then, and you were unable to do that, then the next life you have a much better chance of doing that. So here's the definition of Prarabdha. Prarabdha is a joint agreement between Jiva and Ishvara that for this life, these are the things you're going to be able to do. And this includes your health, your DNA, your intelligence, your choice of parents, choice of society, whether you are an entrepreneur or not, whether you accept things without changing, or you're going to, all of those kind of parameters are all defined in this life. Within some Anirachinea, that also will be there because sometimes it'll be not, but more or less the tendency will remain the same, okay? Versus non-Prarabdha, where you have a complete will to change things as you want to do that. All right, so here are the parameters of all the things that we were asking. And so now I would say, you are a Vedanta. Many of these things are common to both Jnani and non-Jnani. But you as a Jnani need to fine-tune the understanding of your choices and so on. So now to answer your questions, what I would say is that most of your questions should be answered with respect to your responsibilities towards what you have already done. You have been married, you have got children, you have some jobs, and so on. if you are not a jnani, then your own personal gains would also be very important. If you're a jnani, then it will be a mistake for you to assume that you are basically unhappy and you want to do things to be happy. That is not the way right to. So what you have to do is, whatever you have to do in your life, you should see that I am already what I want to be, but I have responsibilities that have been given to me because of Prarabdha. So my change of jobs, my change of personal situations, my changes of children and all have all to be directed towards how will this affect them? Will they be gained by this or not? So for example, supposing there's a person who is dissatisfied with the job, there's no reason to continue with that. Make your own changes, consistent with the fact that the new job is also going to have a lot of problems, okay? If you're not making enough money and your family is suffering, you need to change a job. This is all part of the Prarabdha. There's nothing wrong with that, with the understanding that it is not going to be definitive. It is always going to be wishy-washy, Anirachinea in one way or the other. But there is a big difference between a jnani and a non-jnani. A jnani does not need to spend a lot of energy in kamya karma. And you should really be continued to rely on your own inner happiness. And we know that it's a sense of discovery. It's not as though you know exactly you're happy and so on. It's never like that. It'll take a long time for us to discover that. But at least the direction should be that anything that I do is not for me personally, but for the responsibilities of the family and friends and children that I have been entrusted with. So I know it may not be a complete answer, but hopefully it has some elements to it that will give you some ideas that I'm willing to discuss that further.
Thank you, Ajaji. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, let me take up one more question from Molly, and then after that, I think we'll open it up for others. Okay, so our second question is this. Physical pain and emotional struggles present significant influences on us. They pull us into focusing on the mithya of our bodies and minds. This creates such a significant obstacle that it is difficult to see and understand that we are not these problems, but rather everlasting, joyful fullness. In addition to japa meditation, do you have any other suggestions / tools to help us through these obstacles? This is our question. Okay. So if I in answering this question for Molly, I have to take cognizance of the fact that she's relatively new to Vedanta. I don't know her background before she joined our classes, but I'm assuming that she has not spent a lot of time. So this is somewhat of a new question. And the reason I mentioned that is because if this question was asked by a person who has been studying for the last 2 decades, then I would answer it slightly differently, but not only slightly differently, not completely differently. So be that as it may, Molly, meditation and japa meditation is not very important in our life at this stage. I would say that the main sadhana that we should do, which is what is recommended by all of the acharyas, all of the teachers of Vedanta, is in Sanskrit called vichara. And the English of is thinking. It is really thinking alone which will deliver the goods, not meditation. Meditation is a very late stage, and it is okay for you to feel good as you do in meditation. But when you come out of meditation is where the real struggle begins and where it has to be answered. The mind that we have is very reasonable. It says, you better convince me, otherwise I'm going to keep doing things the way I've always been doing. Because the mind always follows its own convictions. We have to educate the mind. And the education is a slow process. You know, I'm just giving a very funny and a quick example. You know, these new Google phones, they have language translation facilities. So if you want to speak, in fact, I just bought a new Google phone, and it says that now if you want to go to Mexico and if you want to talk about in Spanish, you can just say something and it'll come out with the right ones. Meditation is something like that. It allows you to temporarily calm your mind down and feel good about it and so on. But really speaking, you have not learned the language of what you need to do. Learning a language, Vedanta is learning a language where the mind thinks in new ways. And there's a lot of learning that has to be done. And so I would say at this point in time, a question like this is an attempt to cut short what you need to do. And so this is what we say in our Vedantic we have Shravanam, we have Mananam, and we have Nididhyasanam. Shravanam takes a long time. Mananam takes 3 times as much. And Nididhyasanam is quick, and later on it becomes a quickening of the Mananam and Shravanam. But by itself, it is not that critical. It will, so in the Shastras, it is written, in fact, this was given in one of the passages of Drigdashya Viveka, beautiful passage, and I think I forget the verse number. What is it? Yat manogati tat samadhaya. He says that after a while, when you are learning, this is what is called, Swami Dayanand used to say that, he says that this is called, Sahaja Samadhi. So the real meditation is easy samadhi, which is there all the time, not just once in a while. And so this is kind of like learning Spanish, where you have now imbued the very elements of Spanish, and you're able to speak it without any effort. And so this is going to take a while. And I would say the primary word we should all, as students of Vedanta, be cognizant of is the word vichara. the more you think, the better off you will be. Then you have to convince, and in some ways, I think Swamiji had once given an example. He says, you know, your mind is weighing, it's like a scale. It's weighing two things. One is your daily experiences, that your joy is fleeting, it's conditional, and so on. And in fact, the other way around, this is the heavy one. And then the other scale is, no, it is all your own nature, it is, and so on and so forth. This one is very light yet. You have to put more thoughts into it, more. And so then slowly at some point in time, the scale changes. And yes, you have some temporary problems, you have physical problems, this, that, or the other, but they do not weigh down your fundamental understanding that you are a complete being. That is what a Jivan Mukta is. So at this point in time, a question like this tells me that you are relatively new and you need to really focus on thinking more than meditating.
Thank you very much. That is so helpful in putting it in perspective. So I was aware of these concepts, but I didn't realize the importance of one versus another. So thank you very much for that, Vijayji.
Okay, Molly. All right, so Chola, then I think what I would do is open it up for other questions, if people have them. So you decide.
I have received a couple of people, so I will just call their name first. Zarina, you want to go first? Unmute yourself.
Sure, I can do that. 1 second. Namaste, everyone. It's good to see everyone. My question to you, Vijayji, is I'd like to know how to uncover the unconscious doubts in me, raise them to the subconscious level and then to the conscious level so that I can resolve them in Nididhyasana.
Good. Yeah, you had asked me that, and I never didn't reply to that on that.
Right.
So I think that the way I would see the three levels, the unconscious, the subconscious, and the conscious, is that the unconscious is the deep learning and conviction that your mind has. So I would go back to the question about the mind that I was replying to Molly a little while ago. So what happens is that because of our learning the concepts of Vedanta, you are at least changing the vasanas. So let me introduce that word, which is an interesting word. Swami Chinmayanandaji used to use that very often. And I didn't quite understand why until I started studying in more depth. So just let me go back to the word vasana for a minute, and then I'll come back to the unconscious. So what happens is that we are born with vasanas from our previous actions. So every action leaves a wake behind it, which allows us to continue the way we lead our lives. And the basic vasanas are, I am not okay, I need help, I need to manipulate the world so that I can maximize my happiness, those kinds of vasanas. This is the Ajnani's vasanas, okay? And even after I am learning to change that, the vasanas take a long time. The typical example is that if you have been cutting onions and garlic, that even after you wash your hands, you still have the aroma of onions and garlic. There's something peculiar to those two. And so this is exactly what happens in our lives. So we have a vasana of anatma, which takes us a long time to build. In the meantime, now we have to inculcate vasanas for a jnani. And so what happens is that you attend a class, you learn some new things, and he says, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that before. I must think about it. But then you are now busy doing other things, and those thoughts are gone, but they should leave a little bit of a vasana towards you for the right kind of thinking. So again, this scale thing comes up where the vasana of Atma or Paramatma or Parameshwara, you would call it, now becomes predominant. Okay, so this is whole explanation about vasanas. So going back to the unconscious and so on, I would say that the unconscious means that the vasanas of the anatma are still there. And they do not manifest themselves as they are lurking in the background and make us do things in the way we conduct our lives, the way we react to things and so on, in such a way that we say, where did that thought come from? You know, this often happens but I remember just the other day, just to give you my one, where I got a little angry at something. And I said, wait, then I immediately thought, my goodness, where did this anger come from? I don't understand this. I was really upset at something because it surprised me completely. And my first reaction was, this is stupid. I don't like this at all. But then the difference was that in the old days, I would let it linger, but I caught it right away. And I started laughing at myself. I said, you know, you think you are such a big guy, you've been teaching this, that, or the other, you can get angry. So those were the unconscious thoughts that I expected I should not be surprised. So I am now stopping. I don't get angry if I don't get surprised. But if I get surprised at something, that means that I was really expecting that not to happen and it happened. Then the unconscious does present itself. But then if we do our jobs properly, and I think I'm hoping to do so, it caught me right away. And so it was a completely different thing just for a moment. So that's the way I would think about it, Zarina, is the unconscious.
Thank you for that explanation. It is helpful. And I guess what I'm hearing you say is that to be always vigilant and aware of the thoughts that are surfacing. And as these thoughts from our previous vasanas crop up, immediately be ready to catch them. And is that what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. But I would modify it to say it's not as though you have to be tense to say, okay, now where is the next one coming from? And not like that. It is more of an acceptance. You find that you have to forgive yourself. It's not an easy thing, what we are doing.
Right,
It's something totally remarkable. And if there is a violation of our own principles that occur, you should laugh at yourself.
Right.
Not be completely, I don't want this to, no. And of course, it results in dissolving it very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess dealing with it with kindness, loving yourself, kindness, and then of course acceptance and
Forgiveness.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing. I think all the acharyas say that somehow it's easier for us to have those tendencies for others.
Then for
But when it comes to ourselves, we are very hard on ourselves.
Okay.
And that is not logical. Why should we not be forgiving to ourselves? Why can't we be more tolerant to ourselves? And it is because there is a multi-level structure. You know, we should understand that this is again, I think Swami Meshananji's things. He says the learning of a new language takes a while. It takes, forgive yourself. It's like, you know, you're trying to speak Spanish and you make mistakes and you say, I'm so stupid. I can't believe this. Hey, but you have not spent enough time learning it. It will come.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that explanation.
Okay, Serena.
So Vijay,
Thank you
I
very
have
much.
the similar kind of situation since you answered that just popped up. So when you get angry or something you reacted to, you realize it, you reacted to, but then I think it is less, but still you are making it aware to yourself that this happened. At that time, even the second time it happens, then I bit myself that I just did that. Why did I react again? So how do you deal with that? Still you accept it?
Well, I mean, you know, there is always a self-evaluation element to all this. And the self-evaluation should be, my gosh, I am not as progressed as I thought I was. This is not, I have some work to do. So yes, you have to be honest in evaluating where you are, and if there is something that is really bugging you, then you should say that I need more time to study, more to absorb. Again, yeah, there is forgiveness and acceptance, but tinged with also an honest evaluation that perhaps I am not as good as I thought as I want to be. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So Shanti Kumar has his questions. I'm going to let him ask you.
Yeah. Namaste, Guruji, and namaste to everybody. And we have many times discussed this, but it's just to share a few things which I'm going through. One of them is these days, some of my family members are not doing good. They are into some kind of problems. So in order to address them, and I found that many times we are not finding reasonable solutions, helplessness. So since they are close family members, it's our mamakara, you can call, which is disturbing. Even if it is for a few days, it's disturbing. Despite we have been studying so much for quite some time, of course, I'm aware that no, it is not the way I need to get into this kind of disturbance. This is one part of, and the second question is samsara and mumukshutva, these studies, is it really, I mean, we are all into the same kind of situation, at least my kind of people. We are traveling both on samsara as well as trying to get into this knowledge. Your thoughts on this?
So Shantikumar, let me ask you a question just to clarify. You are saying it is disturbing. This is disturbing to you personally, that things are not, your family members are not doing the right thing or whatever, but it is disturbing to you. Isn't that right? That was my question to you.
Yeah, is mentally little disturbed, but not totally, at least for some time.
Right. Okay.
Because
No,
I'm helpless. I'm not trying to find a solution.
Right. So I think that
or help them out how to really resolve it.
yes, absolutely. Again, I think what we should recognize is that the stage of our life at any one time is the result of a long-standing set of kriyas, karmas, things done, things not done properly, all kinds of things. It's a complicated set of parameters that gets us to where our life is. And things are what they are for a reason. And for us to now all of a sudden decide that, it should be okay for me, is expecting too much from ourselves. So I would say that reduce the amount of reaction and increase the amount of action as you deal with things. At the same time, take the help of Ishvara and say, make sure that my contributions to this situation is positive. I expect my thoughts to be positive rather than negative. I expect that I have not completely absorbed the fact that this has been happening for a long time. And so therefore, now let me resolve to reduce the amount of being upset about it. And if I am upset, let that be a way for me to redouble my efforts, knowing fully well that my new efforts may still not be very successful. Doesn't matter. But at least now, I want your help, Ishvara, to stand behind me so that I can deal with these situations in a more positive manner, expecting that they may not have an effect after all. So if you do that, then two things may happen. One for sure, and the other one may not. The one that is going to happen is you will be less disturbed. You will not have that, because now rely upon Ishvara to say, I want your help to do so. I may have screwed up, doesn't matter who screwed up or something, but I am expecting too much from these situations to resolve itself. Let me reset my expectations. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to sit on my hands. That means that whatever energies that I have are now being redirected towards hoping that situation will change. So this is the way I would approach it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So then the other question that I would answer, which is a broader question, is that, so one thing that we should see is we should try not to make a compartment between your spiritual life and secular life, non-spiritual life. we all have that tendency to say, how do I reconcile Vedanta with all the problems in my life? By saying that, I am actually now segmenting. So one is that the spiritual life, Vedantic life, all pleasant, nice things. You're the Atma, this, that, or the other classes. And then on the other hand, there is shouting, there is this mistrust, there is all kinds of problems. And how can I reconcile them? This is our thinking. The fact of the matter is that really everything is spiritual. It is not, there is nothing secular, it is everything is spiritual. But it's spiritual which is not properly thought about. And so those are all the people who are causing, I'm just, I'm not saying that any people are causing problems to you, but I'm just saying, even problems that are coming to you in the form of people and situations are also sent to you by Ishvara, so that you take situations at hand and analyze it and do vichara, that we talked about earlier. And so everything is really spiritual. And it's just that the viveka between Atma and Anatma has not been properly done. And if you do that, then, and I think this is the other way of looking at it, is that you're like in a play, and there is actually there's a lot of script of the play going on, and you don't like it. And the key is to understand that this is just a play. I am someone outside the play. That requires a lot of vichara. It requires absorption, requires learning a new language. All of that has to happen. And so I wouldn't say that, that the rest, the secular life is bad, the spiritual life is good. Everything is really just spiritual, but poorly understood spiritual. And rightly understood becomes a fun for us. So something like that, but that's a bigger topic and we need to discuss it in some more terms.
Thank you, Guruji. Thank you, Guruji.
Okay. Chala, you are mute yourself.
Sorry.
Unmute
Yeah,
yourself.
all the questions are done that we received,
Okay.
unless somebody has a short.
Let me then go to the third question from Molly,
Okay.
and then any others that people have.
Okay.
Okay, her third question is, excuse me, I understand renunciation/vairagya is a significant part of gaining moksha. Are renunciation and moksha directly related? In other words, is it true that the more we renounce, the more moksha we gain, and vice versa? Theoretically, if we gave up everything except what is necessary to live sustainably, would we reach moksha sooner? So again, I think that I would say that the word moksha is not being interpreted in the sense that we had talked about, Molly, on your first question. So moksha is not as something abstract, it is something, a sense of unconditional happiness for us and so on. So viewed from that standpoint, the answers to this question would be something like the following. Renunciation is a result of thinking, not something that is an independent variable. It's a dependent variable, not an independent variable. And it's a dependent variable because, and I think, we can give an example to this, that suppose you find something what you think was valuable. And then when you come near it, you find this isn't what I thought it was. This is not, and in the annals of Vedanta, this example is given that you are walking on a beach, and you find a shining object which you thought was silver, a silver coin. And as you go near it, it becomes you find this is nothing but a mother of pearl. And a more recent example of that is that in India, especially because people are still smoking a lot, not a lot, but more than in the West, you find that there is a cigarette case that had some silver in it. And so from a distance, it looked like it is silver. But as you go close to it, you find, oh, this is just a discarded cigarette case. So you just give it up. That giving it up is called vairagya. Okay? So here also, now that if that is understood, then in our life in Vedanta, we are clinging to things that we think are important to us. We find that going after things, money, food, honor, friendship, these I have a lot of values for because I think they are very important for me. In the larger scale of things, they are not valuable. And so one of the side effects of this is that in your quest for what's important and what is valuable to you, you fail to look at something really valuable, which is yourself, which is the very self, which is the very Ishvara dwelling in your own heart. And it requires a lot of thinking, but you are not doing the thinking because you're so absorbed in looking at, from that perspective, useless things. You're just going after things that are very transitory, that really only give you, it's kind of like eating ice cream after ice cream after ice cream. And it's going to give you bad things for your health if all you eat is just ice cream. And so vairagya is a result of your thinking that compared to, and so for a person who has been studying a lot, who has been thinking a lot, what you will find is that the attraction of going after the world diminishes because you have found an alternate source of satisfaction just within yourself. And that is what is called vairagya. Now, having said all that, you can accelerate it. You can accelerate it by declaring that I am going to be a renunciate. And so that is possible to be done in India. Very difficult to do outside of India, but in India you can do so because you can, so you have a renunciate who has been given a new name by a Swami. He's now become a Swami, a renunciate, given up his life, given up his household and so on. That doesn't mean that that person has understood the self completely, but he has resolved, he or she has resolved that that's the direction I want to go, and that's how I want to accelerate it. So you take sannyasa, and it's very interesting. Now, if you visit the ashrams, like in Rishikesh, for example, I have some friends who are swamis there, and if I'm there for 1 week, I observe what they do, and it's a very beautiful lifestyle. They'll get up in the morning, they will have some, they'll do some puja, then go for breakfast. After breakfast, they come to their home, and then they start studying some book. And in the afternoon, they're teaching some things to the children. In the evening, they are taking some other. All day long, there is nothing but thinking, studying, thinking. So you can accelerate the renunciation, but that doesn't mean that you cannot do this while you're a householder. You can certainly do that, because the more one studies, you realize I don't need to depend on these props to keep me happy. So to answer your question, about moksha and the relevance of vairagya and so on. Vairagya is an effect, and it takes viveka to generate vairagya, and ultimately you have complete vairagya for a jivan mukta, where nothing ever bothers you, and you have moksha. So that's how the relationships of these words, moksha and vairagya and renunciation are.
Thank you again. Thank you, Vijayji. That is so clarifying for me. And that you keep emphasizing the thinking, the vicharya, is so interesting and helpful. So I appreciate that very much.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Can I ask something?
Yes, Virendra.
No, I'm just talking about the practical aspect. That you have understood most of the concept, and you're practicing what is needed. Shravan, Manan, Nididhyasan and other things. But then there is a time factor also. Just like an egg, it has to take time to hatch, and the hen, sits on it and also helps. This thing is Ishwar Kripa, and in the yoga, it says that Prakriti has two sort of purposes. One is bhog and the other is yoga, moksha. So once you decide you want moksha, then it starts giving you, taking you towards that, destination. So once you decided and you're doing the right things and all, and God is also, you have, unki sharan le li hai, so it will take time. It is in his hands after some time. You are doing the right thing, dharmic life, everything. But the time factor is there because the prarabdha, I don't know what else is Anirachinea, what you can say. It is those factors holding you back are there, but when they will be resolved, you don't know. Adrishya. So is that something that you have to have patience and leave it in the hands of God? Once you are going in the right direction, just like a ship, going in the right direction, and it takes time.
So Virendra, I think that's a good question, and I would answer that by saying yes, absolutely. I think that this is well talked about in our spiritual literature, that it is Ishvara's kripa that will complete your journey. You cannot dictate it yourself, but you have to go in the right direction, as you so rightly mentioned. You keep doing that, and of course you can take accelerating steps. You can make it better and more focused and so on. All of that is up to us. But the end result, when we actually receive this, it really depends on the blessing of Ishvara. And it has to be that way, because he's the creator, he's my sustainer, and until I have his permission, I cannot do anything independently. So yes, all the things that you mentioned are totally correct. You need more patience, more time. But one thing that we should be, having said all that, the one thing that we should be very careful about is not to fool Ishvara, not to take him for granted. We have to be very sincere in our own efforts, but the result of the efforts, as you so, I think this is a beautiful example about, planting of a seed. As children, we want the plant to come out so quickly, but it takes its own time. And so, yes, having a patience but accelerated patience. We have to really provide us. Otherwise, we are fooling the Ishvara that I'm not doing anything. You do everything for me. No. Your job is to go travel in the right direction. And Ishvara's job is to say, okay, you have arrived. Yes, so something like that is very true.
Thank you very much, Vijayji. But one thing, like you said, raised the question of fooling Ishvara. Now, if there was mention of Vasna, and like you also mentioned, you got angry. These things come up, and you have to do those things which you, some promptings you can't help. Then you're not really fooling Ishvara. You're trying, but these vasanas do make you do things which you don't want. And then you realize by practice, like abhyasena tu konte vairagyan cha griyate, you practice and remember, and you as you remember and practice, then of course these things, interval between realization and continuing with that vasana become shorter and shorter, and until it disappears completely. Before you get angry, you just remember and you say, oh, I was going to get angry now, and I'm not going to. So these vasanas are the things, impediments that you have to tolerate. Also, it's not fooling Ishvara, is it?
Yeah, no. By the term fooling, I meant not doing anything about it. So you just say that, so for example, you find I've studied this enough. I am not, that's it. There's nothing more that I need to do. You take Bhagavad Gita. You every time you read Gita, you have now progressed to a higher level, but that doesn't mean that you have completely understood it. I think we should make it a point to study the Gita every few years from start to finish, to make sure that all the things that they talk about really are real for me. So that's what I mean by fooling, that I've read the Gita once, I don't have to do that again. Now I can, do things regardless of that. That's what I meant by fooling. But other things that you mentioned are absolutely true.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
It's very good guidance for me.
We have 5 more minutes to conclude.
We have 1 more hour if you want.
Oh, okay.
No,
Okay, I made you a co-host. I have to go around 10.
no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I think everybody wants to.
But if people have, by all means, and I have made you a co-host, so you can end the meeting.
Yeah. Keshav, you had, I see your hand up.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for looking at that. I have a couple of questions. Right at the end, you mentioned about Bhagavad Gita, and I'm a student of your student, number 1, and student of Gita since 2002, and trying to repeat. Anyway, coming to the question, like very famous shloka, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya, and in this shloka at the end he says, Dharma Sansthapanarthaya Sambhavami. So he comes to Sansthapan Dharma. And in shloka 1866, he says, Sardharman Paritajya. So in the beginning, he's saying he's come here to Dharma Sansthapan, and then at the end, he says, Sardharman Paritajya. Number 2, second question, likewise. In shloka 15, chapter 15, shloka 15, it is mentioned like Sarvasya Chaham Hirdi Samnishto, and in the end, it is said, Vedantrit Vedvid Ev Chaham. And in this shloka, like he has established Vedas and says, Tri gun Vidshya Veda Bhava Arjun. Tino guno ko chhod de. So these 2 contradictions, how do you comment on that?
So I think we should take one at a time, and we may not have time to do all of that. But I think that in the very first one, when you say Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glani, so there it talks about the overall society, that it is very much like the way I would say is that supposing your body is self-correcting, if you look at the health of our body. So if something, for example, when you cut yourself, then immediately there is a pain in that point, and the blood clot forms. So the body is already acting to correct the problem that has been created. So the body is called swarthya. So it is it already corrects itself. But if there is a rather large problem with the body, you may need to go for surgery or for doctor. So what Krishna is saying, Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya, that basically everything should work out well. But suppose there is a large amount of disturbance by adharmic people, then I take notice of that and I correct it. So just like in our body also, after the surgery is done, you're back again to really making sure that the body does itself. So Sarva Dharman Parityajya is a different thing that is not related to that at all. What it means is that ultimately you should not be depending on anatma. You should really be just thinking about myself as the antaryami, which is the very source of joy for you. As we were talking earlier, you don't really, so all the acharyas have interpreted that verse as not as Sarva Dharman Parityajya, but Sarva Karman Parityajya. So dharma doesn't mean that you forsake all righteous actions. No, that's not the meaning of it. This is where the interpretation of Gita is important. So there the word dharma stands for karma, means you don't have to really naishkarmya siddhi. So that is a completely different thing altogether, and those two are not in conflict with each other. The first one is to say that as Parameshwara, I am very cognizant of the society not being able to take care of itself, and I will help as an avatara from time to time. And the second one is to say, I have taught you everything, Arjuna. And this is the ending. This is the very important shloka at the very end. I have taught you everything. So therefore, don't depend on karma, but depend on your own self as part of that. So I think that's how the two are. Keshav, I think the other ones will take a little longer to time. And
Right.
so I think that we will, you can either write to me or we can discuss it some other time. I'll be happy to go over. And I'm really very pleased that you are such a student of Gita. To me, that is a very important thing to do. It has a lot of truths in it.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, so it is 10 o'clock, and I hope that this was useful to you. Do let me know so we can decide on future satsangs at the right time. And I look forward to having this dialogue with you. Hari Om.
Namaste. Hari Om.
सारा प्रोग्राम चेंज